Svar Makdashim bring down that if someone is planning a trip during the week, he should say the Pasha of vayishlach, the previous Mitzvah Shabbos. Some people say Pasha for Yishlach every month of Shabbos because one never knows what unexpected trip can come up throughout the week. Indeed, the portion of a Yishlach until where one is supposed to read is printed in most Miras for Mitzvah Shabbos. Chazal also tell us that if one is expecting an encounter with Goyim, he should first recite Pasha for Yishlach to learn or to remind himself how to act. So much so, the Medrash tells us whenever Rabbi Yanai had to go to Rome and meet with the Romans, he first learned Pasha vayishlach. The one time he did not, at first it still appeared that he had a successful meeting with the Romans, so successful that the Roman general offered him an entourage as security for his way home. On his way home, these Roman soldiers turned to try to attack Rabbi Yanai and almost killed him, had he not bribed them by giving him the horse that he was riding on, or according to the Girsa in the Yalkut, his expensive coat that he was wearing. Either way, Rabbi Yanai had gone through a harrowing experience, and he had a most difficult trip home without his horse or without his coat, all because he forgot Yaakov Avinu's advice. When Esav offered Yaakov Avinu, escort, come, let's travel together, Yaakov said to Esav, you go to Seir, and I'll wait for you there. I have to travel slowly. The Panavicharov used to say that this medrash, this pasuk by Yaakov Avinu, saved his life once. He had gone to visit someone uptown Manhattan, and he had left the hospital late at night, and he was traveling in a subway home in an undesirable neighborhood. And when he noticed two youths sitting next to him, constantly eyeing him and smirking behind his back, he had a feeling that he would be their next victim, or it was their next intended victim. And so quickly taking Yaakov Avinu's advice in hand, he went over to one of them, and he asked if they would by any chance know how many stops more it would take for the train to get to 121st Street. They told him it was 2 stops down. Now they smirked and giggled even more. The foolish Jew had made it even easier for them. Now that he knew where he planned to disembark, that would make the attack even easier. A dark subway platform was better than a lighted train. And so as the train pulled into 121st Street, the Panavicharov stepped off the train. His 2 fellow passengers also stepped out to another door. And just as the train was about to close, the Panavicharov stepped back in. The other 2, unexpecting that he would do that, thinking that indeed he was looking for 121st Street, began to curse and bang at the windows as the train pulled away, but the Panavicharov could only stand by the window and smile back to them. What gave me the idea, he said, Yaakov Avinu. He told Esav, you go to that destination and I'll meet you there. Now in one way, of course, on a simple level, we learned from Yaakov Avinu how to deal with Esav. Yaakov basically had a 3-part battle plan. L'doyin, l'tefillah, u'lemuchama. He would bribe Esav with gifts, would be mispalel to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and if need be, he was prepared for war. And even his preparation for war was mostly in a defensive mode, where he divided his camp into 2 so that if Chas v'Sholom one was struck, the other should be able to run away. But in essence, we have to address over here a more difficult question. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised Yaakov Avinu that it would be protected. Shmarticha b'chol asher teilech. So why was Yaakov Avinu worried? And why was it necessary for all of these contingencies? Furthermore, vayishlach Yaakov malachim, Rashi tells us, malachim mamish. There were real angels that he sent to Esav. Why did he need real angels? From the Medrash it is mashma that Yaakov Avinu bombarded Esav with a koyach of ruchnius. Yaakov wanted to bring down the most spiritual power that was within his realm, in the hope that somehow Esav would come around and be touched by this and do tshuva. While on the surface, it appears that his attempts were futile. Esav would not do tshuva when he saw these malachim. However, Yaakov knew what he was doing, and his efforts would bear fruit for future generations. That is how the Ber Moshe from the Urza V'Rebbe explains this. The battle of Yaakov and Esav in this week's Pasha was a battle for the future generations of Klal Yisrael. We already mentioned last week that Yaakov Avinu's sheep were all the future neshamas of Klal Yisrael. Presumably, the sheep that Yaakov would have to surrender to Esav were future neshamas of Klal Yisrael that would be lost in the course of Galus. Yaakov knew he had the bracha of a shmarticha b'chol asher teilach. His fear, basically, was that Esav would leave some type of impending mark on his offspring. The Klal Yisrael, when it will have to face Esav throughout the future generations, all the different modes of Esav, how will they be able to overcome this overwhelming foe? And indeed, the Ritz and the father's Bracha, the Psukim and the Midrashim indicate in Yaakov's battle with the Sar Shel Esav, the Sar Shel Esav could have no effect on Yaakov Avinu, but the Yidav Kaf Yirechai, he does have an effect on his thigh. And that was an indication that Esav's attempt over here at destroying Yaakov would, unfortunately, manifest itself in a limited way in regard to Yaakov's children. Some of them will be vulnerable throughout the generations. Just like when two generals, opposing generals, are prepared to start a war, each one sits down with his colleagues and they review a map. They analyze all the key positions, the terrain, from beginning to end. Yaakov and Esav were battling for the future. There was a map before them that detailed all the future generations, all the trials and tribulations that Klal Yisrael will have to endure in Galus, and Esav's never-ending threat from different angles to attempt to destroy them. This battle over here between Yaakov and Esav was not a battle fought for that time alone. Yaakov knew he had the heavenly shmirah. Yaakov was paving the way over here for survival of subsequent generations. The words of Parshas vayishlach have within them the malachim, the angels, that were sent to protect Klal Yisrael, to ensure the survival of Klal Yisrael from that point in time onwards until Mashiach. The Gemara tells us in the Masechtas Brachos, David HaMelech used to wake up every single night and chatzais, and he would sing shiras v'sishbachos to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. David never slept much anyhow. He slept for intervals, according to one opinion, of less than 7 minutes, so that the tumah that settles on us so that we have to wash Negelwasser, that tumah David HaMelech would never allow for it to settle on him. He never slept that long. But even these short little spurts of sleep were only up until chatzais. From chatzais and on, David HaMelech was always up. What awoke him to serve Hashem? The Gemara says, Kinar hayatoli l'mayla mimita shel David HaMelech. There was a harp that was hanging above the bed of David HaMelech, and exactly at chatzais, exactly at midnight, the north wind came and blew the harp that would wake David HaMelech to his glorious avodah for the remainder of the night. The Ben Yehoyada explains that David HaMelech would recite Kriya Shema Alamita before he would go to sleep. And the Malachim, created to the words of David HaMelech's Kriya Shema Alamita, were the ones that played the harp and awoke David HaMelech. When a Yid speaks words of Torah and Tefillah, Malachim are created. And in turn, these Malachim drive the person to fulfill more Torah and more mitzvahs. By the same token, Malachim, of course, are created by the wrong words, by Lashon Hara, and so on. And they have an adverse effect on the person. They attempt to destroy him. The Tzaddik Chaim explains that over here as well, the Malachim Mamish, the real angels that were sent by Yaakov Avinu, were the Malachim created by Yaakov Avinu's words. Now the point over here being that, of course, learning Parshas vayishlach teaches us the practical applications of how to deal with Esav, the Dayan, the Tefillah, the Mechama, bribe, prayer, and if need be a war. But in addition to that, there is something else over here as well. When we say the words of Parshas vayishlach, we also create Malachim. When we say the words of Parshas vayishlach, we associate ourselves with the Kedusha of Yaakov Avinu, with the tangible essence that Yaakov Avinu has implanted for us in the course of the generations, that protects us, that advises us, that guides us. Now at one point, we find that Yaakov Avinu is left all alone. He is separated from his family, and he returns. Why did he return? Shachach pachem ketanim, Rashi says. He forgot some small jobs, and therefore during this most dangerous time, Yaakov finds himself all alone, walking back to retrieve these jobs. The Kedushas Yom Tif, the Mesat Medot Chaim Avracha's father, brings the most interesting medrash about this. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu LiYaakov, Ata Mesartas Nafshecha B'Shul Pachim Ketanim. You were willing to risk your life for some small jugs. Chayecha Anu Meshalem L'Danecha Shenasu Lahem Nes Gadol B'Mecha Shmeinoyim. Your reward is going to be that during the days of the Chashminoyim, your sons will be zeichet to a great miracle. Al Yidei Pachim Ketanim. Also through small jugs, referring to the small jugs of Hanukkah. I think I once said in the closing of the Rebbe's Chazal that there is another Chazal that indeed the small jug that Yaakov went to retrieve was the very Pach Shemen that was found in the Beis HaMikdash. In any event, the Gedushas Yom Tov explains that the key word over here is shachach. He forgot the Pachim Ketanim. And that's what frightened Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu never before in his life had ever forgotten anything. Why does a Yid sin? Because he forgets. He forgets that every breath that we take is a present from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If we wouldn't forget, if we would remember that every dollar we have in the bank, every inch of our home, every ounce of our security is a continuous gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we would never ever sin. We would constantly fill our hearts with Torah and mitzvahs and praise to Hashem Yisbarach. But we do forget, and we take things for granted. If we hustle a little more, if we lie a little more, if I engage in this type of that temptation, life will be so much more geschmack for me, and we don't realize that we're undoing our very essence. Why? Because we forget. We forget who created us and who continues to sustain us. Who injected within us this power of shikha, this terrible fault of forgetting? When Yaakov battled with the Sasha Lesav and the Sasha Lesav struck at Yaakov's Gid Hanasha, the Zohar Kodesh says, Gid Hanasha means Gida de Menashi lebarnash mepulchana de Mereyah. When a Yid forgets that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who sustains him, and as a result we don't act the way we're supposed to, a Shemon Esrei is not what a Shemon Esrei should be, a Kriya Shema is not what a Kriya Shema should be, a Yid at the door is not treated the way he should be. That's all because of the Gid Hanasha that makes us forget. This was Yaakov's concern over here. This was Yaakov's constant battle. And although eventually Yaakov's Gid Hanasha would be healed, but there was some damage, as the Tzaddik HaKohen explains it, and as we mentioned before, for future generations and for his children. The Svarim HaKadoshim say that the Malach HaMavah struck at the Midah of Hoid. And that's consistent with what we're saying here. Hoid means to praise Hashem. When you forget, who's the one that gives you life? Then you don't praise Hashem. Then your life isn't a life of praising Hashem. It's a whole different kind of life. The Yevanim, during the days of the Chashmonaim, also embarked on the path that Asa had spread for them. Their objective was L'hashkicham teresach. In other words, here, accept our ideology, accept our philosophy, engage in temptation, as Aristotle wrote, learn to view the world differently. Forget that there is a HaKadosh Baruch Hu who sent you down here and continues to sustain you. And unfortunately, many Yidden forgot. The Chashmonaim of Sir Mesilas Nefesh restored the Midah of Hoid, the Midah of praising Hashem, and that's the emphasis of Hallel throughout the 8 days of Hanukkah. But on the side of the Chashmonaim, on the side of Klal Yisrael, who restored the Hallel of Hanukkah, there was a forefather who paved the way for them. And that was Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu was terribly frightened because he forgot the Pachim Ketanim. Yaakov never ever forgot anything beforehand. And Yaakov Avinu knew that he had to be Moser Nefesh himself to retrieve what he forgot, to be Oikev the Midah of Shikha of Klal Yisrael, to restore the realization that a Yid knows he has to come on to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is why it was the Dafka then, that it was when Yaakov risked his life to retrieve, to uproot the Midah of Shikha, the Midah of forgetting, that the Sashal Esav challenged him. And that all-important battle between Yaakov and the Sashal Esav would ensue, where ultimately Yaakov would have to pave the way for a Yid to be able to fight off the Midah of Shikha, the Dairos. And that is why the Medrash said that it was in the schus of that Mesiras Nefesh that indeed we were zeichet to the Nes of Hanukkah. And finally, let me share with you a story that I will share with my class in Parshas vayishlach. There once was a machlokes between two great tzaddikim, Rav Yaida of Ostra and Rav Pinchas Mekart. The dispute was as to what was the serious problem of their generation. The Ivy felt that the most devastating problem that Klal Yisrael suffered during that time was something which unfortunately we are all too familiar with, and that is the talking during davening in shul. Rabbi Ivy felt all efforts must be directed against correcting this problem. Rav Pinchas Mekaris, of course, agreed with him that the problem had to be corrected, but he felt that there was another problem that took precedence. It seemed that it was a custom during those days that many of the daughters of poor Jewish families, would wander into all sorts of houses throughout the town to sell whatever food they picked up from farmers and so on, and he felt that the potential was there for terrible, terrible mechshayim. And each of these tzaddikim argued as to what they should put their efforts on first. And finally, they agreed upon something which tzaddikim sometimes do in emergency situations, and that was to open a chumash and to see what parasha comes out of. So they opened what turned out to be, by chance, of course nothing is by chance, but it was a chumash bereshit, and he opened up the parasha vayishlach. And the pasuk that they pointed to, Shimon and Levi defending their actions of killing Shechem, saying to Yaakov Avinu, what? Should our sister be a Zaina? We had to take action. So at first glance, it looked like Rav Pinchas Mekaris was right. This was the divine message over here. In response, however, Rabbi Ivy was quick to point out what the Targum Yonason says in this pasuk. The Targum teaching this pasuk says, Mesameres b'knashti in the Yisrael. It will be said in all of the gatherings of Klal Yisrael. Knishta also refers to a Beis HaMedrash. All the gossipers will gossip. You heard what happened to Yaakov Avinu's daughter? We can't allow such a thing to happen, Shimon and Levi said. So it was clear that both of these tzaddikim were right. Their efforts in improving tznius, hand in hand with doing whatever one can to bring back the kedusha and the hoid, the true kavod Beis HaKnesset, were equally important. So, and the truth is, during the days of Hanukkah, where, as we have discussed, the Hallel is the crown jewel of Hanukkah, the ability that Klal Yisrael has to always praise Hashem and not to forget Hashem. So our vehicles of praising Hashem, our koiches of tefillah, and the places where we do it, our migdash mi'ah, should be brought to the forefront. And during a period of time where the Chashmonaim were mitzvah themselves to uphold the kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash and gave their lives for it, is it really that much of a Mesiras Nefesh to ask of ourselves that we do our share in upholding the kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash, of our migdash mi'at? And at least this one Shabbos, let it be a beginning, and let's try not to talk during davening. The halacha is, if chas v'shalom someone is in a situation where murderers come over to a group of Yidden, and they say, give us over one of you. And if you don't give us a hard time, you just turn one of you over to us, we will let the rest of you go. If not, we will try to kill all of you. The halacha is they are not permitted to give anyone over. On the other hand, if the mob says, we want so-and-so, they're looking for a particular individual, either you give him over to us, or we're going to kill all of you, then al pi halacha, they are permitted to turn over this person. The obvious difference between the two cases is that in the first instance, they're asking the Jews to pick someone and decide who is going to be the carbon. That you're not allowed to do. Shvichas Dam is one of the three things you have to be mitzvah nefesh yourself for. However, if they're looking for a specific individual, so you're not really deciding who he is. It's only a technicality over here. Is he turned over, or are they going to come in now and kill everyone? So given these two options, it is permitted to turn him over. Of course, in a practical sense, it doesn't quite always work out as simple as that. The Weizmann Rav in his Chuvas about the concentration camps has a heart-rendering story of a person who came over to him and said his only son had just been dragged away by the Germans, scheduled to be gassed the next morning. He could bribe him out, but he knows that if the capo is going to release his son, upon accepting the bribe, he's going to grab another Jewish child and put him in his place, because the head count has to be the same. Is he permitted to do it? And the Vayishlach began to cry. He said, Laman Hashem, how can I answer such a question? For such a question you need a Sanhedrin. For such a question you need Svarim. For such a question you need other Rabbanim to consult with. And the man said, so that means you're not giving me a heter? And he answered, I'm saying I don't know what to tell you. Well, if you don't know what to tell me, that means you're not giving me a heter. He didn't say the same. When he met the Vayishlach later, the Vayishlach was embarrassed even to look at him. He couldn't bear to see this person's face. What was he to say to him? But the man seemed very calm. And he answered, Rebbe, did I not even do greater than Avram Avinu? Avram Avinu put his son up on an Akedah and took him off. And I put my son on and left him on. Because I didn't have a heter to exchange him in place of another Yid. In the Yerushalmi of the Masechtas Trumas, there is a story by one of the Tanoim who was a regular chavrusa with Eliyahu Hanavi, that for a certain amount of time Eliyahu Hanavi did not come to him. And when he inquired about why you were missing, how come you didn't come to me, what did I do wrong, what fault did you find in me? So Eliyahu Hanavi told him, you should know that the government troops were looking for a certain individual. They surrounded a certain town. They threatened the town, if you don't turn him over, then we're going to kill the entire town, and you ruled that they can turn him over. So this Tana answered, but that's the halacha. And the Eliyahu said, that's the halacha. But Midas Chasidus is that Yidden are Moise Nefesh themselves, one for another. In other words, technically you're right. But people that learn with Eliyahu Hanavi don't rely on technicalities. And this issue comes up in Chazal several times. There's a story of Sheva ben Bichri. Later on when Nebuchadnezzar demanded Yayakim and Yayachin. There were many stories of people that were Moise Nefesh themselves, so that the rest of the people shouldn't be in Sakana. There's much to talk about. But let's put all of this aside. Given the little bit of information that we have, how do we explain how Yaakov Avinu organized the people when Esav came to attack? If you just type the pasuk without somewhat of a deeper look at it, it does seem a bit strange. But Yosef is a Shvachis, it's Yaldei and Rishayna. First came the Shvachis and their children. There's Leah of Yelidea Achroinim. There's Rachel of Yosef Achroinim. Why? Sagt Rashi, Achron Chaviv. And therefore Rachel and her children would be the most protected. Leah would be less protected. And the Shvachis would be even less protected. Now again, you want to be technical? This wasn't an issue of turning them over. This was an issue of who is better positioned to defend himself. And Yaakov Avinu himself went in front of everybody. He stood even in front of the Shvachim. The most vulnerable position that he left for himself. He said, "In Yada Yosei Rasha Lehilachin," if that Rasha comes to battle, Yilachin beat Tefillah. The first one he's going to encounter is me. So it's not that Yaakov Avinu Chas V'Shalom over here was shirking responsibilities. He was willing to give up his own life before Esav can hurt any of the Shvachis or their children. But still, even after clarifying that, does it not appear somewhat strange that Yaakov Avinu would play favorites in terms of safety? Doesn't that go against the spirit of what Chazal are telling us, that ein doisen nefesh mitnei nefesh, that we have no right to choose who gets picked first, who goes to the front line? So the Shinei Rav says you have to understand what Yaakov Avinu's cheshbon was. Yaakov Avinu was going to be Moise Nefesh himself, give up his own life for anybody. In terms of picking someone to stand by the front line and take on Esav, he picked himself. He said, I'm going. Now the issue was, how does he position the people behind him? The reality is, whoever was directly behind him would need more Siyata D'Shmaya in the event that he failed to turn Esav around than those who were behind those people. They would have a greater chance to escape. So he could draw lots, he could make a goyrol and decide who goes where. He could say, fight it out. You decide who goes where. But tzaddikim have a different mahalach when it comes to these things. How did Yaakov Avinu view this? Chazal tell us that if a roideis is a tzaddik and a nirdaf is a rasha, meaning a tzaddik is chasing a rasha for whatever reason, Hashem Yisbarach is mevakesh elboin hanirdaf la'tziloim min haroidef. When a person is in pain, when a person is being attacked, that's ma'oyer rachmanis min hashamayim. Elokim yivakesh es hanirdaf. People that are nirdafim down here in this world, there's an Indian that the Shari Tefillah are more open to them than to someone else. The Rebbeinu Shalom has more rachmanis on a nirdaf than on a roideis, even if his only schus is the fact that he's a nirdaf. Yaakov Cheshbon says the Shin of Rav in the Sefer Divrei Yecheskel was a simple one. The Shvachos, the Bnei HaShvachos, relatively speaking, were nirdafim. Even though it was in a very marginal way, but to a certain extent, we see in Chazal, they were looked down upon. There was a certain hachnah, there was a certain shivin leiv that they had to deal with. Yaakov knew that their tefillas are more apt to be answered. They generate more rachmanis in Shemayim. They are naturally more protected by the Rebbeinu Shalom. And Yaakov felt that Esav would have a much more difficult time hurting them because they are nirdafim. Ki Hashem yivakesh es nirdaf. And that is why he put them first. He put Leah behind them, knowing that relative to Rachel, Leah was also a nirdaf. Not that anyone was chasing her, not that anyone was trying to hurt her, but that was the situation. Her heart was more broken. Yaakov was concerned that Rachel and Yosef, who were perceived as those that were ahuvim b'Yosef, his favorites, they would be the least protected min hashamayim. He felt that they were more vulnerable, and therefore he put them all the way in the back. He had to strategically place them in the best situation. And that's what Rashi means when Rashi says, why were Rachel and Yosef placed all the way in the back? Because Achron Chaviv, he organized them according to the level of chiba. The ones that were the most cushioned, the ones that were the most loved, they are the ones that are the most vulnerable. They had to be placed in back. Achron Chaviv wasn't an emotional feeling. I like you more, therefore I'm going to protect you more. Achron Chaviv was a tactical situation. Now, lest the person say, let me see now. I have over here my enemy trying to lift his packages onto his donkey or unload his donkey. I have over here my friend trying to do the same. Let me help my friend. You see, my enemy, he's a nirdaf. The Eibshter will help him. Let me help my friend. I'll let my enemy suffer Hashem Shemai. Right? There's a certain danger over here. Well, that person is clearly wrong. The halacha is that person is obligated first to go to his enemy. Really, you're not allowed to have enemies. But enemies happen because of the way people treat each other or because of the way sometimes people think we treat each other. And when you attack your enemy with kindness, sometimes he's an ex-enemy. So Al Pi Allah, he has to go to his soine first. In order to avoid this misconception, in one pasuk, the pasuk clarifies the kavanah of Yaakov Avinu. If Yaakov didn't mean this l'shem shemayim, where would he position himself? In other words, how do I know if a person is justified when he makes a cheshbon like this? Does he really mean this? That he feels the most vulnerable or the most protected? Or, l'maisa, he's putting his friends in the safest place? The answer is, what does he do when it comes to himself? If Yaakov would have hid all the way in the back, so the argument would have been hard to make. Had Yaakov positioned himself in front of Rachel and Yosef to protect them, the argument would have been almost impossible to make. That all of this was totally severed from any emotional feeling. But the pasuk makes it very clear. V'hu ava lifneya. Yaakov himself stood in front of everyone. He was willing to be killed first. So Yaakov was not approaching this from a position of who I like best, whom I want to protect best. He was willing to lose his life before Esav would touch any of the shvachos or b'nei hashvachos. That proves that the rest of the tragedy over here was also clearly l'shem Shemai, with total self-sacrifice. And it had nothing to do with the way Yaakov felt. Achin chaviv does not mean the one I like best gets the best position, gets the job furthest away from the front lines. Achin chaviv means because you are so chaviv, therefore you don't have the mile of a lekim yivakishes and near does I have to somehow position you differently. And this is a litmus test. This is the rule. Whenever one makes decisions as to who gains or who suffers, there's always the question, what does he have in store over here? Where does he position himself? That is the answer, whether or not he means the L'Shem Shemai. The Rebbeinu Shalom changed Avram's name to Avraham, and the Rebbeinu Shalom also changed Yaakov's name to Yisrael. However, even though the pasuk says, Lo Yikari Shimcha Od Yaakov Ki Im Yisrael, Yaakov is still referred to as Yaakov, even in the pasuk. Sometimes Yisrael, sometimes Yaakov. The Yerushalmi usually explains why. Yisrael is on a higher madrega. Yaakov represents more of a situation of Hachna and Bittul, but he doesn't lose the name Yaakov. Our relationship to the Yavis is still Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, and Elokei Yaakov. We are also the Bnei Yisrael. Mashenki, when Hashem changed Avram's name to Avraham, so it's allowed to call him Avram. It's only Avraham. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are a total of 13 letters. Echad is Gematria 13. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah are also a total of 13 letters. Also Echad, Gematria 13. The Ovis and the Yimois together, 13 and 13, are 26. That's the Shem Havaya Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Ovis are the Yesod of Emunah in our hearts. In Parshas Lech Lecha, Rashi told us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised Avraham Avinu, Yevcha l'goy gadol, that's Elokei Avraham. V'alerechecha, that's Elokei Yitzchak. And V'agadlo shemecha is Elokei Yaakov. Had Yaakov Avinu's name officially been changed to Yisrael, and he would not be referred to Yaakov afterwards, so we would have an extra letter. Yisrael has 5 letters. Yaakov has only 4. That would have meant, says of Sham Shemesh Chapala, that Avram would have to have remained Avram and not Avraham, because the sum total of the others has to be a Chad. That is their purpose. That is their essence. Amunah for Klal Yisrael. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Avram Avinu, V'agadla Shemech, I will make your name bigger. Your name will be changed from Avram to Avraham. And on V'agadla Shemech, say Chazal, Zeh Shoimim Elokei Yaakov. Because we still say Elokei Yaakov, Yaakov retains the name Yaakov despite the added name of Yisrael, so we can afford to make Avram Avraham. But if it wouldn't have been Elokei Yaakov, which in a sense means, had Yaakov not retained the anivot, the hachna that represents Yaakov Avinu, being caught at the ankle, even after he became Yisrael, had Yaakov not been Yaakov, so the whole formula wouldn't work. The whole Aves wouldn't have been Aves. Klal Yisrael wouldn't have been Klal Yisrael. So V'agadlo Shemecha, we can change your name from Avram to Avraham because Yaakov Avinu remains Elokei Yaakov. The Ben Moshe from Yosef Rebbe Chaim Avracha has beautiful memorim over here. It was more so than anything else the hachna of Yaakov Avinu, the bittul, knowing that he always has to come on to the Rebbeinu Shalom, regardless of how rich he was, of how great he was. That was his success. That was Mamshach his Ashuas Hashchina. Yes, he was Yisrael, but he still retained Yaakov. Now that's easy to do if you're in trouble. It's easy to have bittul and hachna and anov if a person needs the Rebbeinu Shalom, and he's experiencing difficult times. But when everything goes your way, and you finally survive the greatest lions of the world, he survives Lavan, he survives Esau, and he's rich and spread out and has a tremendous family, to retain the same level of hachna despite the added greatness, that's not so easy. That is a great feat. The Yaakov Nosa Sukkaisa, Vayiven Leibayis, he built a house, and for his cattle also Sukkais. And therefore he called the place Sukkais. You build a house for yourself, you build some huts for your cattle, and therefore you call the place huts. He named the town after his barn. What does the pasuk mean over here? Dr. Bermeisha, Sukkah means a temporary dwelling place. Sukkah means the B'nai Shalom, I know I always have to come on to you. It can rain at any moment, and it can rain through my schach. Yaakov wanted to emphasize that to his family, now that they were settling down, now that they had survived their dangers and they can enjoy their riches. Remember, a Yid is always in a sukkah. And finally, in conclusion, the Svarim say, V'yata amarta hated etiv imach. The attitude of a Yid is what brings more bracha than anything else. If V'yata amarta, if you say hated, if you thank Hashem and say, Hashem, you're so kind to me, whatever I have is more than I deserve, that triggers the etiv imach. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says, you think that's good? I'll show you what good can be. So that was what Rav Chaim Bracha said, that any Yid that survived the war had a malach, had an angel that stood next to him and protected him the entire time. In the course of our lives, whether we see them or not, whether we feel them or not, there are many malachim that protect us. They're sent by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to guide us. When a person does a mitzvah, he creates a mitzvah malach. This mitzvah malach guides him, pushes him to do another mitzvah, protects him, and demands schar for him in the Yom HaEmes. When a person walks home from shul Friday night, the Gemara in Masechtas Shabbos tells us that there are two malachim that accompany him, a good malach and a bad malach. If the house is set in Shabbos order, the table is set, the candles are lit, there's shalom in the house, the good malach insists that the same should be true for next Shabbos, and the bad malach is forced to answer amen. This good and bad malach, explains the Marsha, these are the malachim created by the person himself. These aren't strange entities that are sent down from someplace, foreign concepts that attach themselves to a person. These angels are a mirror image of the person's own actions throughout the entire week. His mitzvahs create the good malachim, pushing him for good and demanding bracha, and conversely, his averos create the bad malachim. A tzaddik whose actions are extremely pure, he can interrelate with these malachim that he creates. We find by the Ovais that malachim, angels, were very frequent visitors in their houses. That is because their mitzvahs were so pure that you can clearly see the malach and deal with him, instruct him, and guide him. The Zohar HaKadosh asks, Yaakov Avinu had so many malachim, camps of malachim. Why was he so scared of Esav? And for the Chedushi Arim based on a Zohar. Yaakov Avinu could have just had a meeting with his malachim, and as the chairman of the board of his malachim, because of his so many mitzvahs and his tremendous control over them, he could have instructed them, deal with Esav. Go ahead, angels, protect me. And really, he had absolutely nothing to fear. But Yaakov didn't go that route, because Yaakov Avinu knew that in future generations, Klal Yisrael does not have the ability through their mitzvahs to see the malachim so clearly, although those same malachim are being created. Yaakov Avinu, by design, entered into an arena of fear and concern, and cried at his heart to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I am frightened of Esav, please help me. Because he wanted to be Mamshech a Yeshua. He wanted to establish a force to protect Klal Yisrael, a channel to protect Klal Yisrael throughout the generations. Yaakov Avinu said, if I'm going to use angels and malachim, that's not going to help my children. So he simply took out a tefillin and cried for the safety of his children, and cried for his survival. Because Yaakov Avinu knew that those tefillos are establishing avenues of communication that his children, until Mashiach come, regardless of from where in the globe they are offering those tefillos, those tefillos already have an open avenue to ride through on. In the saga of Klal Yisrael and Galus, and the unexplainable survival of Klal Yisrael, one has to understand that it is still Yaakov Avinu's malachim that help us. Yaakov Avinu's tefillos that give us the power to be able to do what it takes to survive in Galus. And that explains the Oyev Yisrael from the Apterov is pshat in the word lefonov. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefonov. He sent these angels ahead of him. Yaakov Avinu put himself in a position where his dealing with Esav now is going to benefit Klal Yisrael forever after. He wasn't thinking about his personal safety. He was thinking about the survival of Klal Yisrael dealing with the Esav of their particular generation throughout. And that is the Lefonov ahead of him. Ahead of him throughout all of the different sorrows of Klal Yisrael. Ahead of him to the year Tafshin Samach. Ahead of him until Mashiach comes. Yaakov Avinu had us all in mind. And this is, it's Kedai to quote the Halakha words of the Oyev Yisrael. Tizeh with this. Hoyil Gam came to Dairi Dairis. It is effective for generations and generations ahead. B'chol Eis at any time. Kisha Oindim Aleini HaMetzirim. When those who want to hurt us stand up against us. Umeikim. And they look to destroy us. Of Gamkein Nisoiru Hamalachim Mamish. So these angels, the very angels that Yaakov Avinu sent, Shesholach Yaakov Li'achav to his brothers, they are regenerated. They are summoned. And Yaakov Avinu's command still applies to them. The Nemanim Heim B'Shluchasam, and they are trusted in their shlichus, Leilach Tamid, to always go, B'Shlichus Yaakov, as that same agent of Yaakov Avinu, the Esav Mitzrayim, during a time of need, L'fayis es Achiv, sometimes to appease his brother, referring to Esav, L'ashkita, and to settle him down, Mikase v'chamaseh, from his anger and wrath, Ulahashbeth mi'oleinu, and to destroy from us kol ha'meketrigim u'masdinim, all those who prosecute against us and hate us. And that Yaakov Avinu comes face to face with the Malach of Esav, and he wrestles with him. Vayayavik ish imai. There's a machlokes in the Gemara in Masechtas Chuleh. What this Sar Shal Esav looked like. Rav Shmuel ben Achmeni says, Ka'akum nidmalai. He looked like an Oived Kechavim, like an idol worship. Ula says, on the contrary, he looked like a Talmud Chacham. Yaakov was wrestling that night with someone who looked like a Talmud Chacham. But Yaakov knew he was really Esav. So some Sefer explains, the person Yaakov was wrestling with, rather the Malach that Yaakov was wrestling with, was the son of Esav, who drew Kiddusha, who drew power from the schus of his Kibbut Av. He did honor Yitzchak. And in a sense, what the Gemara means is, Yaakov saw over here the Koyach Hara, the danger for Klal Yisrael. He wanted to wrestle with this danger, come face to face with it, to ensure the survival of Klal Yisrael with Galus. And by the same token, he had to wrestle with the Schusim of Esav, which represented at least the Koyach HaKedusha that gave him a power to exist. Chazal tells us, some Sefer explains, there are 365 veins in a person that correspond to the 365 loisases. There are 613 mitzvahs, but 248 of them are positive commandments, like tefillin and tzitzis. 365 are lavin, not to do any malach on Shabbos, not to eat chametz on Pesach. Each one of the 365 veins in the human body correspond to another lav in the Torah. The Gid Hanosha corresponds to the lav of marrying two sisters. And that's why Yaakov's Gid Hanosha was vulnerable. Now the 365 lavin, which correspond to the 365 veins, also correspond to the 365 days of the solar year. Each day has a lav. Tisha B'Av corresponds to the lav of the Gid Hanosha, according to that cycle. Yaakov Avinu battled with the Malach, as I'll tell us, on Tisha B'Av. The Zohar HaKadosh says, someone who eats on Tisha B'Av is Ki'ilu Achal Gid Hanosha. As this battle for the survival of Klal Yisrael and Galus goes on, and the Malach is able to score, at least as a figure of speech, one punch, affecting the Gid Hanosha of Yaakov Avinu, this represents the Churban Beis HaMikdash. According to at least the opinion of the Rabbanon, there are two Gid Hanoshas, both the right and the left side, that are also. So in a sense, when the Malach struck at the Gid Hanosha, it refers to the striking and destroying of both
Bate Mikdashis, the first and the second. The Malach, however, was hoping that would be the end of Klal Yisrael. However, the pasuk says, Vayar Kila Yachala. For Bechorben Beis HaMikdash explains of some Sefer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu poured out his wrath on the wood and on the stones, and Klal Yisrael still survived. Hanosha, as in Gid Hanosha, the word Hanosha is the Gematria 360. Satan is Gematria 359. And this teaches us, explains of some Sefer, that although Klal Yisrael to a certain degree would be vulnerable, but even where Yaakov Avinu lost, even this round of the fight, he also won. Because Lamaisa, even in Hanosha, even in the Gid Hanosha, even in Klal Yisrael's exposure to Galus, but ultimately their survival is guaranteed. Even Hanosha is one more than the Satan. Hanosha 360, the Satan is only 359. Even where you scored your victory, it'll never be a complete victory. The pasuk says, "Vateka kaf yerach Yaakov," and the hollow of Yaakov's thigh was dislocated. Be'yafka yimei, as he wrestled with him. And then the pasuk says, the Malach said, "Vayoyna shalcheni, let me go, ki ola hashacha." Vayoyna, and he said, "Leah shalechacha, I will not let you go, ki im beirachtani, unless you bench me." So Rashi explains, unless you bench me, unless you confirm for me the brachas which my father blessed me, because I have contested them until now. And the pasuk goes on to say, that indeed he blessed him. That Achim Sefer brings the medrash that during the times of David HaMelech there was a terrible epidemic, and 100 people were passing away every single day, Rahman al-Islam. So David HaMelech was misakein that a yid should make 100 brachos every single day to offset this gzeira of the 100 people per day. It would appear, says Achim Sefer, that this malach that Yaakov Avinu wrestled with, the Samach man, even in his loss to Yaakov Avinu, was able to strike some pain into the future of Klal Yisrael. And therefore the pasuk says that take a kaf yerech Yaakov. Kaf is gematria 100. Tei is 80, chaf is 20. And Yaakov Avinu explains some Sefer, even though he knew that he had won the fight, that the existence of Klal Yisrael would be guaranteed until Mashiach comes, was still upset about this battle that the Yisahara may have scored some victory with. And therefore he demanded some type of antidote for that. I will not let you go until you bench me. And so the Malach had no choice but to give over to Yaakov Avinu the secret of how the 100 brachos every single day will offset the gzeira of the 100 people. When the pasuk says Vayevarach oisei sham, that the Malach benched Yaakov Avinu, sagt Achim Sefer, that means that the Malach taught Yaakov Avinu the secret of the brachos, which Yaakov Avinu taught to his children, which David HaMelech implemented in his time, which we are still supposed to take advantage to this very day, to be careful with the 100 brachos a day. On Shabbos we're short of 100 brachos because we don't have the 18 brachos in Shemoneh Esrei, actually 19 with V'lam Shinim, the 3 times. So we look to make it up. We make it up by concentrating on the Birchas HaTorah during Kriyas HaTorah. We make it up by being ma'aneg as a Shabbos, by eating more. And tzaddikim used to count these brachos. The Brisker Rav once stayed by someone for Shabbos, and the host came in as the Brisker Rav was going to Mincha and politely asked if maybe the Rav wants anything prepared for Shalashudas. And the Brisker Rav asked for, besides for the bilkula, he asked for an apple and a banana. And the hostess was a little taken aback. He dafka needs an apple and a banana. She didn't have a banana in the house. So she scurried from neighbor to neighbor, and Baruch Hashem, in the same building she was able to secure a banana. But she wondered about this. He dafka needs an apple and a banana. But the Shalashudas was prepared for the Brisker Rav, including the apple and the banana. And the Brisker Rav came home for Mincha, he washed Shalashudas, didn't eat the apple, didn't eat the banana. So the hostess was even more perplexed, and she asked her husband to maybe ask the Brisker Rav to explain it. So he said, in all due respect, Rebbe, perhaps the Rebbe can tell me why you, Bedavka, wanted an apple and a banana to start with, and why afterwards you didn't even take it. So the Brisker Rav said, I'm sorry that it caused you any difficulty. but I count my brachos every single day. I cheshbon how many brachos were still left, given my Shemoneh Esrei and so on, and I knew I only had 98. I was 2 brachos short, so I asked for an apple and a banana to be able to make a Bayer Priya Eitz and a Bayer Priya Adama. As to why ultimately I didn't eat it? Because unexpectedly I got an aliyah by Mincha. So I had 2 more brachos over there. So I was mashlim my 100 brachos. Vayivarach Ha'isaysham, again the Sam Sofer says, the Malach taught Yaakov Avinu the Seder HaBrachos. The word emes, Zakta Sam Sofer, is Gematria 441. Add the 100 brachos to emes, it's 541. Yisrael is Gematria 541. And that, says the Sam Sofer, is the Pshat, the Yikar Shema Yisrael. That Yaakov Avinu walks away from this battle with the name Yisrael officially, with the ability to apply his own Nida, the Nida Sa'emes Titin Emes L'Yaakov, with instructions for his children to say the 100 brachos, Gematria Yisrael, ensuring the survival of Klal Yisrael. It's interesting to note, the Pasuk says, Vayava Yaakov Shalom Ir Shechem. Yaakov survived his ordeal with Lavan, with Esav, and he comes Shalom to the city of Shechem. The Medrash says, Nichnas B'Erev Shabbos im Dimdumei Chama. Yaakov Avinu entered right before Shabbos, and he was Kazeya Techumin Miba'ayim. He determined the Tchum, until where the Tchum Shabbos was, and he instructed his children not to pass any further. You cannot walk past the Tchum on Shabbos. You have to stay to your source. And from here we see that Yaakov was Shomer Shabbos even before Shabbos was given, says the Medrash. The Ber Moshe from the Yershav Rebbe Chaim says a rather fascinating thing. Vayava Yaakov Shalom. Shalom is Rashi Tevis of the 3 mitzvahs that we don't do because of Shabbos. If Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, we don't blow shofar, that's the shin. When Sukkot is on Shabbos, we don't take the lulav, that's the lamed. And if Purim falls on Shabbos, we don't read the Megillah, that's the mem. And he says more. In regard to other mitzvahs, if a person cannot perform the mitzvah, so we don't blame him. He couldn't perform the mitzvah. He was an oinus. But that doesn't necessarily mean he has the schar of performing the mitzvah. We don't blame him for not doing the mitzvah. This person didn't have any tefillin. He couldn't put on tefillin. What can you do? He's not going to be punished for that. But to say that he has the schar of putting on tefillin, that's questionable. On the other hand, if Yidden don't blow shofar on Shabbos, like we didn't blow this year, because Shabbos was Rosh Hashanah, and we didn't take the lulav the first day, and if you can't read the Megillah, so it's not that we're missing those mitzvahs. Shabbos steps in and takes over these mitzvahs. Whatever tikkun the Yiddish neshama needs, whatever chutz Klal Yisrael needs as a result of the shofar, the lulav, and the Megillah, Shabbos does it for us. And in a sense, that's what we've been saying all along. Yaakov Avinu gave a koyach to Klal Yisrael that regardless of how difficult the situation is, and there will be times that part of us are going to be dislocated, that our ruchnius is going to suffer, that our gashmius is going to create a difficult situation for us. But despite that, a yid always has a koyach to bounce back. If he understands not to walk past the tchum, if he understands the source of where he is coming from, that we are children of Yaakov Avinu, and Yaakov Avinu's malachim were sent lefanav, ahead of him, for us. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu help that this Shabbos Pashas vayishlach, the Shabbos that represents Yaakov's shleimus, his tefillos for Klal Yisrael, his tefillos for us, indeed, should be our Shabbos, the Shabbos that is a catalyst for brachos and yeshuas to come. A person has to know not only how to talk to others, but sometimes you have to know how to talk to yourself. Particularly, how to talk to your own Yetzer Hara. When the Yetzer Hara comes and he tries to convince you to take up time from learning, to take up time from chinuch with your children, not to give tzedakah, you have to fight fire with fire. You have to tell the Yetzer Hara, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get me to enjoy life more. You're trying to get me to have more money in my bank account. I guarantee you, Yetzer Hara, that I will not have any more relaxation. I guarantee you, Yetzer Hara, I will not have any more menuchas and nefesh. I will not have any more money on that bank statement when it comes at the end of the month if I listen to you than if I do what is right. That is how you have to talk to your Yetzirah. In other words, convince him that even in Gashmias, you're not going to have less because of the mitzvah. If anything, it's just the opposite. When you go hepach haseichel, and you're willing to sacrifice, you're opening up the doorways of parnasa and bracha and hashemayim. The trick is, explains the Kedushas Levi, that if you do this long enough, the taina won't be necessary anymore. Then the motivation of even in Gashmias, it's going to be better if I do the mitzvah, will no longer be a necessary element in what is driving you to do the mitzvah. The mitzvah itself is more important to you than anything else, regardless of what the outcome is. L'mosh, a person has to meet a very important client. Potentially he can make a lot of money for many years to come. He's in a rush. He runs into the minyan in the morning. It's the 7:30 minyan. The problem is it's already 7:45. Well, he figures he can quickly throw on his talis and tefillin, and by then they'll only be up to Baruch Hu, and if he really zooms express why, he can catch up to them, maybe by Ashi Volotzian, maybe by Aleinu. And I guess it's a kind of a de facto tefillah b'tzibur. After all, he can't leave the client waiting. Or maybe he should daven slowly and wait for the next minyan. So that's an asayan. Ein chacham kebar asayan. No one is as smart as the one who faces an asayan himself. And we have difficulty facing this asayan. So what we ought to say to ourselves is, at least to start with, this is our elementary mahalach, listen to your Yetzirah. And if I do meet the client on time, I'll get the job. How do I know I'm going to impress him? How do I know this is going to be lebracha v'lo leklala? How do I know that this business deal is not going to result in more daigas than menuchas hanefesh? I have no guarantee anyway. So maybe hagufa, maybe with this itself, that I am willing to sacrifice my impression by coming late because I first have to speak to my Creator. Maybe this within itself is exactly the reason that I will get the job, or I will be directed in the right way, whether it's good for me to get the job or not good for me. The emes is, there are countless stories, and we can all testify to this in our personal life, that usually when you sacrifice, it works out that way. You don't gain by sacrificing a Yiddishkeit. I don't know if it's my imagination, but personally it happens to me often when I hurry up at the end of the davening because I'm late for an appointment and I feel that I left a little bit too early, so I didn't wait for the last Kaddish. Strange thing. Several times this happened to me personally. I wound up spending 20 minutes looking for my hat, or looking for my coat, or looking to see where I placed my tefillin bottom down so I can now put them in and wrap them up. Only to realize after 20 minutes that there they were right in front of me, just that someone had covered them. So here I have it. Nish didot, nish yenevel. Not I davened, and not I made it out on time anyway. Often I'm in a rush to get to yeshiva, and I will stop to pick someone up, and I'll think twice, but it's so late, I should stop now to pick someone up every time you stop till he gets in, and I'll miss the light, and then I'll think get stuck behind an oil truck or a garbage truck. But then you say to yourself, look, so next time leave earlier, but now that you're traveling, there's a mitzvah in front of you. Who gives you a right to pass that mitzvah? And then I will find that somehow I found a parking spot that I never usually find. And I wind up getting there even earlier than anticipated. And you see it b'chush, kama b'kama pa'amim. You pull up on a block that it's very difficult to park on, and someone is just pulling out on the right side of the street an alternate side. Now, I know had I been here 2 minutes earlier, he wouldn't have been pulling out yet, and I would have gone off looking for a spot, perhaps finding one 6 blocks away. And you say to yourself, you see, you never lose out by doing the right thing. And still you have an asayah next time. But at least, if you think about this and take note of it, it's a motivation. It's a motivation that at least sometimes you'll stand up to your nisyanis, albeit sometimes the little nisyanis, but little nisyanis add up. However, in the back of your mind, you should know that this is only in terms of motivation. A much greater madrega is that it's totally irrelevant to me whether I will get there on time or not. It's totally irrelevant to me whether I'm gaining time or not. I'm doing the right thing because it is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to do. But it's very hard to start with that. Because if you're not at that Madrega, then you will lose Nisayan after Nisayan. The Kedushas Levi explains that this is the message that Yaakov Avinu is teaching us in this week's Sefer. Ki Yivgashcha Esav Achi. When Esav, my brother, bumps into me. That's the Esahara. That says, Lucy, you'll get home a minute before Shabbos, but look, you have something to finish up. That's the Esahara that says, don't answer that phone now, even though someone is waiting to talk to you. You're too tired. That's the Esahara that says, hurry up, so you'll miss a Kaddish, you'll miss a Kedusha, but you're late. Ushe'elcha leimar. And the Esahara is going to ask you saying, Lemiata, who is this for? Why do you want to give this up and spend some more time davening? Why do you want to give this up and be nice to someone that you really don't want to be nice to? Why do you want to give this up and close your store on Shabbos? Whatever a person's assignment is, who are you doing this for? Lemiata, for who? V'anasayla, and where exactly are you going with this? And who are these before you? Who do you think you are? You're a big tzaddik? You have an achrayus. Go on and do what's good for you. Let's go. Come on, don't be a fool. Don't be naive. For what? For whom? Why are you doing this? So how do you respond to this Yetzirah? Now you could say, being very noble, I don't care if I lose out, I am nothing, it doesn't make a difference where I'm going, I don't need anything, I'm going to do what's right. But don't fool yourself, says the Kedushas Levi. There are those who are on the Madrega who do that. There are those who are on the Madrega that the Yetzirah doesn't even bother with them, because he knows he's going to get that answer. But you and I know that sometimes we have an assignment. So this is the right way to respond to this Esav, to this Yetzirah. The Yamah to first make it clear to him that li'avdecha li'Yaakov, they are your servants, Yaakov. Understand that you're trying to start up with my mitzvahs. My mitzvahs create malachim, they create angels. And the greater the Mesiras Nefesh, the more powerful those malachim are to be the Eires Chusin. But look, I know, Esav, you're not into that. And you still taina, but a client is a client, money is money, late is late, pressure is pressure. So let me tell you a secret. Let me share something with you. Mincha hishlucha ladayni le'Esav. This is a present for you as well. The Taiv is negayed, you too, says the Kedushas Levi. Because through these maisim Taivim, not only am I earning a place in Olam Haba, but my place in Olam Hazeh is going to be here. Because all the things you claim that I should try to go out and get and earn for myself at the expense of mitzvahs, my experience tells me just the opposite. That when I'm willing to sacrifice, that's when things are going to go my way. Not only in Olam Haba, but even in your territory, Esav. Mincha hi shlucha ladayni li Esav. Indeed, the Tzaddik Rameil of Parmeshlan explained. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, ha'isa mitzvah achas koine loy praklit echad. Someone performs a mitzvah, you create a malach. That malach now is an attorney, a defense attorney, who is an advocate on your behalf. Rashi tells us, vayishlach Yaakov malachim mamish. These were real angels that he sent to Esav. Who were these angels? These were the angels that were created through Yaakov's mitzvahs. They were the angels that could possibly protect him. Thus Rashi says, vayishlach Yaakov malachim mamish, real malachim. The Rashi Tevis of the word mamish is malachim mi mitzvahs she'asa. Mem shin, malachim, that were created from the mitzvahs that he was mekayim. The tzaddik of Nachum of Chernobyl once came to a certain town. And as his minig was, he never ate from any meat until the shaykhs first came to him and showed him his knife. So they told the shaykh that the big tzaddik is in town, prepare your knife. And he took the knife that he had already prepared to shech with, but he decided, such a tzaddik is in town, let me sharpen it just one more, let me recheck it. I mean, his whole prestige, his whole reputation here was at stake. And he took the knife, and before he even began to work with it, he said to himself as follows. Every single day I go to work. Every single day I take this knife and I prepare it. And I shecht, and Yiddische kinder eat from this meat. Totally on my achayus. Whether they eat kosher or not, It depends on my ehrlichkeit, my feeling for this knife. It's between me and the Rebbeinu Shalom every single time I check this knife. And I decide, at least in my best judgment, what is considered adequate. Now that a chashuv person has come to town and my reputation is at stake, so what am I doing now? I'm saying, no, I'm not going to spend a half hour preparing this knife. I'm going to spend an hour preparing this knife. So the Rebbeinu Shalom, a half hour is enough. But for my own covenant, a reputation, and honor, an hour, the shaykhid made a decision. The knife is going to go to Rav Nachum of Chernobyl as is. It was prepared the same way it was prepared every single day before his shechita. The shaykhid brought the knife and presented it to Rav Nachum of Chernobyl. Rav Nachum picked up the knife for a second. Now his chassidim knew that usually he would take the knife and he would be baidik it and check it for a long time. This time he took the knife and immediately handed it back to the shaykhid. Everyone thought that he was so displeased with it. He simply wasn't going to spend time looking at it, but the tzaddik made it very clear that exactly the opposite was true. He said, I don't have to check this knife. Why not, the chassidim asked? Because if it's good enough for a Kadosh Baruch Hu, it's good enough for me, answered the tzaddik. So this is another example of when you make an erlich cheshbon and you go hepach hasechel, I'm going to prepare less, then your vayishlach is greater. And it's also another example of there's a metzius. This person decided that in order to be an erlich yid, in order to be honest with himself, this was the proper thing to do. And as a result, he created malachim. And those malachim, well, they sort of danced around this knife. They testified to it. And those same kind of malachim dance around anything that we do with Mesiras Nefesh. Anything we do that is in search for emes. Especially when it requires any element of self-sacrifice. Now, Yaakov Avinu gave specific instructions what to say to Esav. He said, Esav, this is what your Eved Yaakov says, in Lavan Gati, I lived with Lavan, and I stayed there until now. And he goes on to say, Vahili Shar, V'chamar, signs the Eved, V'shivcha, and I have oxen, and the Chamayrim, and flax, manservants, maidservants. Rashi tells us, in Lavan Gati, I lived with Lavan, and you should know, Esav, Taryag mitzvah shemati. I guarded the 613 mitzvahs. Now, how exactly was that going to impress Esav? Had Yaakov sent him a message that he had taken a course in self-defense, had Yaakov taken a message that he had learned from love on how to go to war, maybe that would have been somewhat of a deterrent. That it was Mekayim, the Taryag mitzvahs. I mean, if Esav believed in the Taryag mitzvahs, he wouldn't be Esav. So the Pashat Shad is, but the message was, if you think that there's a hole in my schusim because I was by love and therefore I'm vulnerable, that's not the case. The Kedushas Levi quotes from his father, a very interesting word. Yaakov wanted to make the case that you, Esav, you really have no reason to be jealous of the brachas because the brachas were not fulfilled. What do I have? I have shar v'chamar. So Rashi tells us, Father gave the bracha mitala shenayim u'mishmanei arts, of the dew of heaven and of the fat places on earth. So why are you jealous of my shar and my chamar? It's not from shenayim, it's not from the earth. If I had many, many fields, then maybe you can be jealous. You can say, hey, those are my brachas, you stole them from me. But don't be jealous of my shar and my chamar. This has nothing to do with the brachas. Zakta Kedushas Levi, the Shemus father, weaving all of these pieces together. Esav is going to get this message. That Yaakov is very rich, but he's rich with shar the chamar. He's rich with animals. It has nothing to do with the bracha of his father. So don't be jealous of the bracha. So Esav may think, well, the bracha really went to Yaakov. As for why Yaakov does not have mitala shemayim or mishmanei haaretz, that's because the bracha was conditional. Yitzchak Avinu made it very clear to Yaakov that the brachas were conditional on him being Mekayim the Torah. So maybe, just maybe, the reason, and Esav will think this way, the reason Yaakov did not get the brachas is because he's not the same Yaakov. All those years of love and it had an effect on him. So he would have no reason whatsoever to diminish his level of hatred. I mean, the brachas are still there, they're still conditional. As soon as Yaakov turns around and does tshuva after he leaves Lavan, he's going to get that Nishmani Ha'aretz, which in Esav's eyes belonged to him. So therefore, Yaakov Avinu's message to Esav was as follows. Listen here, Esav. I didn't get father's brachas. Don't be jealous of me. It's not Nishmani Ha'aretz. It's not Mitala Shemayim. It has nothing to do with the brachas. So you see that the brachas didn't come to me. Are you going to say that's because I wasn't Mekayim the Torah? But when I will turn around and do tshuva, the brachas retroactively are going to take effect, and therefore your sinna should still be in place? So I'm telling you, but I was Mekayim the Torah. In love and gati the Taryag mitzvah shemati. I didn't learn from his bad maisim. So what do you want? What's the reason for your sinna? I met the conditions of the brachas and I'm not getting it anyway. But perhaps we can understand this a little bit on a deeper level. What did Yaakov Avinu say to Esav? Why are you angry? Why are you upset? We divided. You wanted this world, and I get Olam Haba. You go out, you hunt, you rob, you swindle. You do whatever the picture of Esav does. But let's assume even on a legitimate level. You go out and you try your best to make it in Olam Hazeh. No consideration for Olam Haba. So what are you upset about? You see that I also have Olam Hazeh. So you're saying, I thought we had a deal. I thought we divided this. You're supposed to work on Olam Hazeh. I'm supposed to work on Olam Haba. How come I have so much of Olam Hazeh? And that's why you're angry. So Yaakov is saying, Esav, don't be angry because I'm not trying to get Olam Hazeh. It's coming on its own. I just went to Lavan. I had no choice. I lived for many, many years with the epitome of schacter, with the swindler of the century. And my attitude with him all along was who I am. The mahus of the midas ha'emes. Taryag mitzvah shemarti. I had only one concern. I put my emphasis on one thing, and that is Olam Haba. What should I do? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me the Shar and the Chamar anyway. But I didn't try for the Shar and the Chamar. I tried for the Olam Haba. It's just that what you're supposed to get, you get anyway. The story is told. It's not true, but just to bring out the point. So there was a man who had a son who was a big Amoretz, and he had a very, very hard time marrying him off. It wasn't just his ignorance, other problems, his midas, and so on. So the shadchan suggested, go to so-and-so, and for money, this person will look away at anything. So indeed, the prospective chassan and his father went to the father of the prospective kala. Now, the chassan's father realized the trick is not to allow him to interview his son. And so he kept on talking about what a beautiful wedding it would be and how he would pay for the wedding. And the girl's father said, that's all fine. And he turned to the boy and said to him, no, maybe you can tell me a shtickle Torah. And the boy and his father got equally as white and then red. And finally, the father said, I want to emphasize again that I will pay for the entire wedding. Okay, the girl's father understood. So he said, well, maybe you could at least tell me a piece of Gemara. So the girl's father said, I will even pay for all of your family's clothes. Aha, said the girl's father. Okay. So he lowered the net even more. And he said to the boy, well, maybe you can at least repeat a Mishnah to me. The boy's father said, I will pay for all of the Sheva brachas, each 7. Again, lowering the net a little bit more, the girl's father said, can you at least tell me a pasuk chumash? To which the boy's father responded, and I will do over your house so there's place for some of the Sheva brachas. Well, that was it. They brought in the cake and the schnapps, and there was a mazel tov. And as the guests were gathering, suddenly the Kala's father throws himself to the ground and he begins to scream, and he says, Vasavich Gatan, what did I do? What did I do? And people ran over to him, and someone said, he realizes what he did now, that he sold his daughter for money. And then he got up and he said, no, not that. I realized that if I would have asked the chassan if he could repeat Aleph Beis for me, then the father would have to have married off all my other children. There's a Mordecai insight from Reb Leib Chasman, Zechel Levracha. in the Sefer Aryo. Let's look at Esav. Esav encounters angels, malachim, that are sent to caution him and to warn him, don't start up with your brother. Rashi brings the Chazal that Esav had some rough experiences over here on his road to meeting Yaakov. Kita shel malachim, groups of malachim paga he encountered, who were harassing Esav, pushing him around. It's not so easy to push Esav around, him and his 400 generals over here. Him and all of his men were intimidated. And these malachim said, who are you? Who are these people? And when they were told, oh, this is Esav and his men, they began to hit them even harder. And they cried, leave us alone, leave Esav alone. You know who Esav is? He's a meyuchas, he's Yitzchak's son. Didn't help. They said he's an Eichel of a Ramavinu. Didn't help. They kept on hitting him. He's a brother of Yaakov. A brother of Yaakov, so they stopped. So all of this Esav had experienced on his way toward Yaakov, but it didn't stop him from continuing to march toward Yaakov. Considering, because I'll tell us episodes of people that saw a malach once, and that left them frightened for the rest of their lives. So Esav had to be pretty adamant over here, or pretty even psychologically stubborn and powerful. What a backbone to be able to go through an experience like this and then to ignore it and to continue marching on toward Yaakov. His no dent whatsoever is made in his hate in the sinner. Ultimately, how is Esav subdued? He looks at all the presents, he looks at all the money, he looks at all the sheep, and he looks at the tremendous honor that his brother is according him, and suddenly he kisses Yaakov. Esav, with the tenacity of facing up to being beaten by malachim and then to march on. This stubbornness is suddenly diluted when Esav sees the money. There's a tremendous lesson over here. Esav lost control of his ambitions once the honor and money was laid out before him. Of course, over here, it was good that Esav lost his control over what he wanted to do. But in terms of how we should view this, we have to realize that we may have good ambitions, and we may even be very stubborn to attain those lofty goals. And we can be willing to endure a lot. And then sometimes, when it comes to money, we melt. Whether it's jealousy, taiva, or honor, it takes a person out of the world that he set for himself. Not just olam haba, even olam hazeh. And the person realizes this. He realizes that he is his own undoing, but he can't hold himself back. And Yaakov knew this. Yaakov knew Esav's shortcoming in this regard. He took full advantage of it. When it says that Esav kissed Yaakov, so there are das on top of the word vayishlach, and there's a machlokes. One Tana holds the reason there are das over there is because he did not kiss him with all of his heart. Shemeichai says, even though halachi b'yezua she'esav said Yaakov el'shenichnu rachmo v'yosesha, and it was v'nashke b'chaliva. Now let's focus for a moment on the opinion that says that he didn't kiss him with all of his heart. The Aryal explains that that is consistent in light of what we're saying. Esav himself was wondering, why am I doing this? What happened to all my grandiose plans of war? My ultimate chance of destruction? Of taking advantage of Yaakov's vulnerability? What happened to all of that fighting spirit that wasn't even subdued to malachim, to angel? What happened to me? All of this kavod and all of this money is set aside, and I fall into the trap. And Esav knew he was falling into the trap. It bothered him. He still couldn't stop himself. Look out, explains the Aryah. We can fall into the same trap. We know we're destroying ourselves, but there's a little bit of honor, a little bit of money, or what we think is a lot of honor and a lot of money, spread before us like cheese in a trap. We can't hold ourselves back. We have to step in. Yosef Chaim Zonnefeld lived in very difficult times, controversial times. Yosef Chaim was the pillar upholding Emunah warning people about the threats from others who came in the guise of just readjusting things, and on the inside, what they really wanted was plain bona fide apicursus. And he once was paid a visit by a group of some very rough individuals. They came armed. And they pretty much, in a nice way, told Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, but between the lines warned him, that if he doesn't stop presenting his opinion on certain matters, it may cost him his life. At that point, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld got up, opened his shirt, and said, "Go ahead, shoot. I'm ready to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim." They were a little taken aback by this. And then he sat back down and he continued to explain to them exactly what his opinion is, exactly what his concerns are, precisely what his observations are. And they were somewhat taken aback by his very realistic understanding of the situation. They left, not only not harming him, but with some degree of respect. They knew they had a very formidable foe over here who would not be easily overwon. And Yosef Chaim later explained exactly what he was thinking. In the city of Shadik in Poland, there was a Moser. This person was bad. On the outside, he wore the levush of a frum Jew. On the inside, he was the worst of the worst. And everyone knew you had to give him protection money. Everyone knew that you had to pay him. He had not just ties with organized crime. He was not in with them. A kesher, Olgavi kesher. He was one with them. And much to the horror of everyone else, he kept on demanding more and more covenant in the base of Medrash. Everyone knew about this. Everyone was frightened of him. Many were imprisoned because they could not meet his demand. The only one who really did not know what this person was all about was the Rav. The people of Dafka kept it from the Rav because they were scared of a confrontation and they were scared of being the collateral damage, so to speak, if the Rav should try to fight him. Still, the Rav once found out about it. Apparently someone had come and had an encounter with this person, not knowing who he is. He ran to the Rav to ask that he come to a Din Torah, and even though the Gabon of the Rav usually try to screen these kind of things, they missed it. The Rav asked him to come to a Din Torah, and he sent back a very unflattering comment to the Rav, and the Rav began right away to understand that something was amiss over here, that the people had been hiding something from him. Shabbos came, and this person demanded his aliyah, whether it was shlishi or shishi. Some even wanted the Rav's aliyah, and the Rav stood there by the Sefer Torah and said, "No, you're not going to get an aliyah. You're mechal shem shemayim, and do tshuva first." And this person said, "I'm not going away from the Sefer Torah." So the Rav slapped him. That was something that this master was not expecting. He turned around in rage, and he gave everyone a cold stare that sent a shiver up and down their spines, as if to say, "Now it's my serve." After many months, the Rav was invited to be a moil in a certain town, and he went with two of his talmidim. And suddenly the wagon took a shortcut, and they realized they were being ambushed. The Rav saw the master running toward him with a sword. The talmidim started to say vidui. The Rav seemed to be very deep in thought. And strangely enough, when the master met the Rav, he said to him, "Mereinu v'Rabbeinu, please be mindful of me. How dare I speak to you with such chutzpah?" He did suggest that he wants to settle the score with his talmidim. However, the Rav told him he would rather not. He respectfully bowed, stepped back, jumped onto his horse, and rode away. The talmidim were too shocked to even verbalize their question. What just happened? The Rav waited for them to calm down, and then he told them, "Look, I saw what was happening even before you did. And I began to think about a pasuk in Mishleh. The pasuk that says, "Kamayim hapanim lapanim kein leiv ha'adam la'adam." You look into the water, you see your image. The hearts of people are the same way. The way you think about someone else, that's how he thinks about you. In my heart, I began to look for schusim for that person. I said, never, no one ever gave him the right chinuch. Who knows what he went through as a child? I worked on myself until mamish, I removed every drop of sinner in my heart. I totally cleansed myself from any residue of complaint, and I really, really presented myself to him with a sense of ahava, with a full love for this person. And as I was thinking this, he also began to think. He began to think, no, maybe the Rav deserves respect for what he did, what a courageous act. He's the only one that had the tenacity to stand up to him, the courage not to step back. And by the time we met, he had nothing but respect for me, although he had a little bit less respect for you. And I learned it from Yaakov Avinu. The pasuk says, "Banu al achicha al Esav." They came and they told Yaakov, "Gerois, we were by Esav." We tried to present the idea that Yaakov is your brother, but he is Esav. He's not looking at the brotherhood over here. He is marching toward you. The Arba Meis Ish Imai. And the truth is that the feeling was somewhat mutual. Yaakov was within his right to hate Esav as well. If he didn't hate him for the personal problems that he did, he hated Esav because of the Chilul Hashem that he was making. But now Yaakov Avinu saw trouble. This is the Hashgacha. Esav is marching toward him. He is seething with hatred, bubbling with the thirst for revenge. So Yaakov Avinu says, I have to change my tactics. Vayishtachu arza sheva pa'anim, ad gishtoi ad achiv. He bowed down 7 times until he approached his brother. There are many drashis in Chazal on these 7 bowings, but this is how this Rav explained it. 7 times Yaakov bowed down. 7 times. In other words, based on 7 stages, Yaakov Avinu worked on himself to remove the hatred in his heart against Esav. Being Danim L'Kavchos, Esav has a much bigger Yetzer Hara than I do. Esav could never make peace with himself. Esav cannot settle down. He never learned how to utilize his tremendous kaiches and guide them in the right direction. Now, it's easy to say, okay, I don't hate you, I like you. But these tzaddikim knew how to look into their hearts and to totally clean it. And Yaakov Avinu made 7 attempts. He removed 1 level of sinner. He removed another level of hatred. He removed another level of animosity. And it took 7 times. There were 7 waves of Yaakov Avinu cleaning out his heart from any sinner, ad gishtoi ad achiv, until he was able to approach him in the form of, you are my brother. Because let's remember, that's how it started. They came to him and said, Banu al achicha, but he's not achicha, he's Esav. So Yaakov Avinu was working backwards, from Esav back to the achicha. But Yaakov didn't fool himself. It took 7 attempts. It took 7 ishtachavos until he arrived at ad achiv. Until he was able to say, okay, now I truly, truly don't have any mashu, any shirayim of hate in my heart. Once Yaakov reached that madrega of ad achiv, in a way Esav was compelled to respond in kind. He had no choice. And indeed, according to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, he kissed him with all of his heart. Esav himself couldn't figure it out. Rav Yosef Chaim Zanasel told over the story, and he said, you should know that I employed the same method. There were 5 people over here that were armed, that have killed in the past, and came there, lifted their fists toward me. If they weren't going to kill me, they were definitely going to leave me with a physical imprint. I realized the danger that I was in when they threatened me to stop presenting my opinion, my feeling, my understanding of what Kiyum HaTorah depended on. And when I realized the danger, I employed the same method that the Shaddik Rav learned from Yaakov Avinu. After I showed them that I was not going to give in, and I was truly ready to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim, I sat down with them, removed all the hatred from my heart. These people were never taught. They were misguided from day one. They don't know what it means to have a Munah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They have never tasted the joy of a Shabbos. They don't know the sweetness of a Blat Gemara. I removed the hatred from my heart, and I directly addressed them. And if they did have guns in their pockets or rocks in their fists, they had no choice but to drop it. He saw Yaakov's wives, his children. Balatur explains, Esav had a kash over here. We had a fight, our first fight, before we were even born. Didn't we have a deal? You take Olam Haba, I take Olam Haza. So what are these children? I thought in Olam Haba you don't have children. Priya Varivya is only down here in this world. So what did Yaakov Avinu answer? He said, Hayeladim Ashechanan Elikim Es Avdecha. Yaakov Avinu said to Esav, it's true. I picked Olam Haba. And therefore I am machanach my children in terms of someone who picked Olam Haba. We have a Shabbos table. We talk to each other. There is a stress on Lashon Nikiyah. There is a family life. We go buy an esrog together. As a result, not only do I have Olam Haba, but I enjoy a special relationship with my children down here, because they aren't just Yuladim, they are Yuladim Ashachon Elikim as Abdecha. That is the way I raise them. A present from the Rebbeinu Shalom. They are the ones that have to carry the torch further. But where are your children, Esav? You have to hire generals to come along with you. I don't see your big family very close to you. It appears to me, said Yaakov Avinu, because you picked Olam Hazeh, you don't have either. And because I picked Olam Haba, things could be pretty good down here as well. So Esav, you ask, who are these? I'm not supposed to have children because I'm the one who picked Olam Haba? I guess you just learned something, Esav. And that is when you decide to pick Olam Haba, you're zeicha for the fruits of that Olam Haba, even down here.
This shiur is distributed by Kolodas, 11 Stei Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.